Hi, this is Everett's Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom. Now today I'm going to do a painting using Holbein Artists Colored Pencils. I can't wait to get started. Here's my design plan. This is a value plan I've put up. There's a dark area, which is trees. There's a medium value mountain behind and a medium value in the foreground, which is water. And then in the background is a light value mountain range along with the light value sky. And there's a light area here across the front, which would be the impact area. So I've got a design plan here, how I'm going to approach this. And I've got my color pencils. This is the basic tone color pencil set. And I've got my pencil laid out here to start with. And also I have the Holbein MELTZ blender thinner, which is the blending liquid that I'll use here to create this color pencil painting. So this is my field sketchbook, which on one side is a drawing, and on the other next sheet next to it is 140 pound watercolor paper. So I'm going to transfer my design sketch over to the watercolor paper. This sheet's about 10 by 7 inches in dimension, 10 inches long, about 7 inches wide. And here I'm drawing in the mountains in the background, and with a very light pencil line, just to give me a guideline. I don't want my pencil lines to show up. And then the foreground, I have my impact area located also. And then here you can see the light sketch that's on the field sketchbook. So following my value plan, I'm going to start putting in my darker colors first. Here I'm starting out with the holly green dark color, and I'm using vertical strokes here. This is a tree line, so I'm giving it more vertical strokes to show maybe the trees or so forth, but basically just getting in some dark colors. And I'm using a firm pressure on the pencil and a little bit of burnt umber, again a dark color, using the side of the pencil this time, but just putting some dark. I just want to get dark colors down on the paper to define that middle ground dark area. So starting out, just beginning to put marks down with the pencil, and this is the dark area, which is fairly well defined. Here I finished up the dark area. You can see here I got I used different colors. I used the burnt umber, I used the holly green, and also I added a little bit of cobalt blue. Those three colors I used to create the dark area in the middle ground. That's the tree line. Now next, with the light blue pencil, the aqua color, I'm going to put a little bit of color into the sky. The sky is a light value, so I'm just putting just a little light layer of blue color, just a very light, very little up there. And picking up a little bit of violet also in the sky. Again, just mixing a few colors up there very lightly. Just lightly pressing the pencil down with a light stroke. And even a little bit of burnt umber. So it's just a mixture in the sky. It's kind of an overcast day, so it's going to be a little gray, with a little blue showing of some of the sky. Now in the background, there's that faraway mountain range, and here I'm going to use a little bit of violet, and again, a very light color, just the first layer, just getting down some strokes, and adding a little bit of burnt umber on top of that. Again, I'm looking at a medium value, a light value here, so it's very little pigment on the paper, and adding a little bit of cobalt blue. So it's a mixture of colors that I'm putting in the background mountain range. It'll show up as a light value in the final painting. Using very light pressure and just spreading the colored pencil around that area. Here I'm adding just a little bit of black in there. The black will gray down the colors a little bit. I don't want them to be bright. I want them to be light, but not too distinct. So yeah, light application, light strokes, just mixing the colors up there to give me a little bit of different variety of color, but also a very light color. Now in the middle ground, there was another layer of mountains behind the trees, and here I was starting with a little bit of burnt umber there. This will be a medium value, but starting out with a very light color first, just light strokes, adding a little bit of black, just to gray it down a little bit. And then violet on top of that. So again, a mixture of colors even in the middle ground here on the low-lying mountain or hills. Just a light stroke of color, bit of variety of color. Now moving down into the impact area, I'm going to put a little bit of this green or apple green. It's a light green, a lot of yellow in it, but it's a light green. It'll make the impact area brighter, which is what I want. I want the impact area to be a brighter color. This would be a little patch of grass coming off the landscape there. Now working on the water, very interesting. I'm going to use a mixture of violet and cobalt blue. Again, very light application, and I'm using a horizontal stroke here. Again, water is flat, so I want it to have a feeling of flatness. So here I think a horizontal stroke of the colors would make that look more readable. So I'm adding the cobalt blue and the violet into the water. Again, a mixture, just a light application. In colored pencils, I build up my colors gradually. I start out with the light colors, then I gradually add another layer on top of what's put down. Along the shoreline, I get a little more. I'm putting the cobalt blue in there to define the water. And I'm going to be careful to save the whites. There's a little bit of white caps in there, a little bit of wave surf with white caps. So I'm saving those whites. So I'm painting around those very carefully. And when I say painting, I feel really when I'm using the colored pencil, it's almost like painting with watercolor. I'm doing a flat stroke with the with a colored pencil. Now moving back into the middle ground again, I'm going to put some cobalt blue into that low hill mass behind the trees. Start to build up that color. I'm adding another layer of color to that low hill behind the trees. Using the blue to push it back in depth, the blues show as a further away. Adding in now a little bit of holly green on top of that cobalt blue. Again, building up that color gradually from a light value to a darker value. This will be a medium value when I'm finished, a medium value behind the tree line. I'm following my value plan here of how dark, where my darks are and where my lights and medium values are. I'm varying the color. I'm moving back and forth between blue and brown and green. And I'm building up the mass of the mountain gradually, adding color there on top. Also now at this point I'm trying to define the outline of that low hill behind the trees. So I'm adding a little more attention to the edges of that hill mass behind the tree line. So you can see that hill starting to form a little bit. Now I'm adding a little more holly green onto that mixture. And here I'm beginning to define that hill mass even a little darker. Adding that dark green in there to define that hill mass. And there's a little patch over here, a little patch of a hill. I'm going to make that more blue to push it back into the distance of the landscape. This little area here will be a little bit bluer than the other part. So I'm making a blue color here, which will push it back, and then the green color will come forward with a holly green. So I'm working those colors back and forth now. Now I'm checking the values, getting a little darker, adding a little more color. Adding some burnt umber in there to add to the mix. I'm mixing colors on the paper as I go. Now in the background mountain, I'm going to make that a more violet color. So I'm adding the violet back there. Again, here I'm working on the edges of that hill mass. And that'll separate that a little bit from the sky. Just a little bit of definition there. It'll be a light value, but I want to have enough definition to separate it from the sky area itself. So I'm concentrating on putting a little violet back there in that particular mountain range in the background. And I'm defining the top outline edge. Using a light stroke, spreading that violet across that mountain area. Now come back into the impact area. I'm going to add a little more color now. This is make it a little more vibrant here in the impact area. And I'm using a little more pressure now to get more and more color down on the paper. So I'm pressing a little harder on this area to get that color well defined. This is my impact area, so I want this color to stand out apart from the dark and from the light. So this is my lightest area, and it will be next to the darkest area, which would be a nice contrast for the impact area. This simulates a little patch of green grass that's coming off the landscape out into the water. Now to burn umber, I'm going to add some rocks and a little bit of land, a little bit of sand and rough terrain right there underneath that grass, kind of like a shoreline. Basically a little rocky area. So the burnt umber is giving me that impression of a little rocky land area next to that grass, between the water and the grass. Now up behind the grass, I'm now giving a little definition back here. So I'm adding that dark area now along with the trees. This would be the shoreline. And I'm using a little bit of negative painting here, a little negative drawing here, because I'm defining the grass, a little bit of grass strokes with that brown umber behind. So it's light behind, it's dark behind light to show off that impact area even more. Here I'm defining the shoreline up next to the trees behind the little grass area to give a little definition, a little bit of rocks along the coast there. And there's water up against the shoreline, so I'm saving some white areas that look like little waves hitting the water, hitting the land along the edge of the tree line. Just adding a little more definition here in the impact area. The impact area has the brightest colors, the lightest and darkest colors. Also has smaller lines or smaller objects, and that defines the impact area. Now I'm adding a little bit darker green here to gradually phase in that green with the brown. So that kind of blends in the light green in with the brown on the rocks. Now all my drawings down, I'm going to now put the MELTZ pencil blender to work. This is the part that I'm really looking forward to. I've got all the colors on the paper. I'm going to use a small watercolor brush. This is water soluble mixture of MELTZ. And I'm going to start with the dark area. I'm going to go in and just put that in there. You can see right away how it starts to blend those darker colors together. It combines the pencil marks together. It fills in all the white spaces, and it blends the colors together as it comes in contact with the colored pencil pigment. I'm using up and down strokes here, and also trying to define a little bit of that edge that would indicate the tree line, where the tree would be popping up against that mountain in the background. You can see here how the MELTZ is working. It makes it darker. It blends it very nicely, very quickly. It's a nice smooth application. It gives it almost a watercolor look when you add the MELTZ to the colored pencil. I'm using a small brush because I'm trying to define a little bit more of the edge on here. So I'm using a small brush to demonstrate the use of the MELTZ colored pencil blender. And it's doing a nice job here of combining the pencil strokes together. Just takes a little bit. I'm reloading the brush now and then just to get it wet on the end. It doesn't take very much, just a little dab on the brush, and it spreads out very nicely, very smoothly. You can see all the darks there are just all blended together. There's the dark area behind the impact area. Now I'm going to start working on the water, and because the water has got flat horizontal marks, I'm going to use flat horizontal brush strokes. So with the MELTZ blender fluid on my small watercolor brush, I'm going to use horizontal strokes to blend in the water. You can see I used a very light layer of pencils, but you can see already that carry with that MELTZ, it blends those colors together, and it all spreads those colors out very nicely. So that a very little touch of colored pencil goes a long way. Okay. So this is another technique using the brush with the colored pencil with this MELTZ blender. I'm using the horizontal strokes with a small brush, and to blend those colors together. You can see how it melts that cobalt blue and that violets that I put down there very easily. And I didn't put much down there. It was like a medium stroke down at the bottom. Now there's the complete portion where I finished it off, leaving some of the white paper showing. Now I'm going back and working the middle ground again, that mountain range just behind the trees, which has a little more green and blue in it than the rest of the landscape, to separate it. It's a medium value. It's a little lighter than those dark trees, so it's a medium value behind the trees. And here I'm adding the MELTZ to that, and I'm also defining the edges. Here I'm blending the layers together of the middle ground. So that combination of blue and green and umber and even a little bit of violet all in there together. All that mixture of colors gives me that medium value that I'm looking for. Now I'm going to blend a little bit more behind so the tree line behind is also blending with the foreground trees. So that the medium value will stand out against the darker foreground trees. Now I'm loading the brush now. That little area on the left there. Now this is that little hill mass, which is, I put more blue on this to push it back. This is a little bit behind that green mass on the right. This is another hill that's in the middle ground, but it's behind the other hill. So, so I made it blue so it would push itself, so it would push back further behind the green. Choosing your colors for a landscape is very important because the blues tend to recede, the greens and yellows tend to come forward. But that's still a medium value overall behind that dark tree mass in the middle ground. Now that background mountain, again, I'm going to add the melts there to that. I'm adding the blender fluid to the color that I put down. This is a light value. And it's light, but it's also dark enough to see against the sky. That was a mixture of several pencil marks of violets and umber, and I even put in some blue back there. Even a little bit of black just to gray it down a little bit. So it's a light value, but just dark enough to show up against the sky. And here I'm defining the edges a little bit so we can see the shape of that background mountain. And with a small brush, I'm just gradually adding in the MELTZ liquid, a little bit at a time, not to overdo, not to put too much down at once, but just to gradually blend one section at a time. I'm also blending in that light value or light color in with the middle ground so that they're separated by values, but they're blended without a noticeable line. And continuing on with that background to merge it in with the middle ground. Now I'm trying something new here. I took a little cap here from a container, and I just put out some of the blending fluid onto that cap or lid. And I thought I'd try something different. I add a little bit of water to it, just a touch of water with the brush. And then went up into the sky. I put some color up into the sky, but I just want a very light value up there. So I'm just brushing across the sky, picking up a little bit of that color, a little bit of blue up there, a little bit of violet up there, a little bit of even a little bit of burnt umber just to dull it down. So I'm just trying to capture a little bit, but I diluted the fluid down a little bit with a damp brush. A little bit of water in the brush. Here, and also I'm trying something new. I picked up a 1/2 inch flat brush, and I'm going to smooth out a little bit of the water here in the foreground. So I'm loading that brush with the melts with a little bit of water in it, just like a water brush, just like a watercolor brush. And I'm smoothing out a little bit of those areas with the flat brush. Here again, I'm experimenting a little bit to try out something new myself. This also allows me to cover a larger area faster with a flat brush. But I also want to see how it worked with just adding a little water to that thinner, just to thin it out and to make it easier to move the pigment. And I think it's doing a great job. I think it's working out well in there. Now go up into the middle ground a little bit and use that same brushwork with a flat brush and to smooth out some of those texture areas, some of that pigment there with the pencil. Again, I'm just blending the colors there on the paper. That's the middle ground behind the tree line. And now there's the middle ground tree line that I'm working on just a little bit. In the background, give it a little bit of, get a little share of the same technique with the flat brush. Again, to smooth out the brush strokes, to smooth out the pencil marks. Using a diluted mixture of the blending liquid with the little bit, just a dab of water on the brush. Now here's the results. With my dark area as the middle ground, I'm following my value study. The middle ground had also a medium value behind and then a light value behind that, along with the light value of the sky. Then the impact area was well defined as a light area with the medium value of the water in the foreground, and then the highlights there of water, which will simulate the waves in the water itself. I like the way it turned out. Now there's the final painting. Purple Waters is what I called it. These art supplies are available at Everest Watercolors. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Give me a thumbs up, it helps my ratings. Press the bell to be notified of my next video. See you on the next video.